All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening. That was kind of subtle. Good evening, everyone. All right, wonderful. Now you feel like a lively bunch, just kind of came together that quickly. But good evening. My name is Adrienne Slash. I am the vice president of the organization that brought you here today, Recenter Indiana Incorporated. Recenter is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that's dedicated to encouraging public officials to listen to the voice of Hoosiers. Are you Hoosiers? Raise your hand. Right place. Thank you so much. We also urge everyday citizens to be informed participants in our system of government. So welcome to our second listening session on mid-cycle redistricting. We are also really glad to have invited some elected officials this evening to participate in listening capacity to hear what you have to say, okay? So you should see them. They're here. They're coming. They're here to listen. Okay, in a listening capacity. It's important. We ask them to stand and give a wave if there are some that are already in the room. Stand and give a wave, not a wave. We're a few minutes late on some as well. All right, and so at this time, finally, we want to say thank you to Indiana Citizen for live streaming this event and welcome anyone who's watching us remotely. Welcome to you as well, and thank you for your time. Now I'll turn it over to Linda Heitzman.
Good evening. I'm Linda Heitzman, and I'm also on the board of Recenter, and we are very excited that you're here tonight. We are calling these listening sessions because it's really an opportunity for you to have a say and actually have a vote, even if it's not like the same as, a legislative vote, but at least to make your voices heard on the issues of redistricting. And we have 3 ways for you to participate tonight to hear those voices. 1, there are cards on your table. There are cards and pins. And after Dr. Wilson gives us a presentation and leads a discussion on redistricting, we're going to take questions about redistricting, and she will respond to those, with the information that's available this moment, because it changes by the hour. And then we will also be using live polling throughout the evening. So all of you, I think, had some instruction about how to sign up on your phone with our online polling system. So we will be asking various questions throughout the night, giving you a chance to respond to that. And our third way is we are doing the second half of our program. We're opening it up to beyond redistricting. What are the issues that are on your mind? And what are those things that you wish your elected officials were focused on? And so we will have a discussion of those things as well. So there are 3 different ways that you can raise your voice and participate and be heard tonight. We are actually taking the results of everything we're doing here, and we're tabulating it, and we are sharing it at the State House and on social media and beyond. We also are very lucky tonight because Indiana Citizen is live streaming this, and it is recorded, and the results are publicly available. So you might see yourself on the live stream at some point. Okay, so to get us started, let's look at tonight's agenda. First, we're going to do a quick intro to the online polling tool, get everybody warmed up and used to voting. We're going to have Dr. Wilson do a discussion of off-cycle redistricting. Then we're going to open up the discussion to other audience concerns. And then we'll have a wrap-up and reception, some nice cookies. And we hope that you will just stay around and talk with friends and neighbors.
You can scan QR codes on your Samsung phone using the camera app. Quick setting.
Okay, so it looks like some people have already signed in. So, anybody else still signing in? Looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We need a few more. Everybody signing in. Okay, Neil, you got on. Go team. Anybody need help? We have plenty of helpers in the room if anybody needs help. Okay, So we're going to get started with 3 warm-up questions because we're going to ask 3 types of questions tonight. One question will be a simple question where there's only one answer. Are you a dog person or a cat person? And you will see on your phone the question, and now you will see what the options are. Cat, dog, both, neither. So if you want to select on your phone one of those options, is everybody playing along?
I have 2 chihuahuas.
Okay. Have people voted?
2 very old chihuahuas.
The dog people keep winning in this contest. I don't know how that is possible. But last week, we had a room of almost entirely dog people. Okay. The next question is, what is your choice of morning beverage? On this question, you will be able to select more than one option, okay? Coffee, tea, soda, orange juice, other. And I see people voting. Okay. And the survey says coffee is beating tea pretty badly. I always wonder what the others are that people are. Mimosa. Well, there you go. Okay, and this one works a little bit differently. So this is a word cloud. And so what is your favorite ice cream? And you will have an opportunity to enter words for your favorite ice cream. And once you start entering them, we'll see them appear on the screen, and you will be able to see what other people have entered, and you can tap and vote for something somebody else entered that you did not. So we'll see how this starts to look. Strawberry was popular last week too, Laura. Vanilla is beating chocolate. And you can enter or vote for as many as you want. There is no limit. Okay, so we see how this works, right? Seems pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Okay. So now I want to introduce to you Dr. Laura Merrifield Wilson, who is a professor of political science from University of Indy, I guess. It's not University of Indianapolis, either one. If you keep up on local politics, you no doubt have seen Laura on one of the political news shows or heard her on her podcast, but she's really the foremost expert on redistricting and all things Indiana politics. And we are just really lucky to have her share like all the latest and greatest things that are happening around redistricting. So Laura, take it away.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Linda, for that very generous introduction. As Linda said, my name's Dr. Laura Merrifield Wilson. Fun fact, Merrifield's actually my middle name. I just felt like Laura Wilson sounded very John Smith, and it's a family name, so I just like it to trip up people. Makes it, keep you on your toes. We're going to ask a question and then get into 15 minutes or so of what is redistricting, why are we doing off-cycle redistricting right now, what's the timeline, what are other states doing, hopefully to give you information maybe that you didn't have before, and to give you a stronger sense of where you stand on the issue. And then we'll talk about other issues in politics too. So I want to start with this question here, the why, right? Why are you here tonight? What motivated you to attend? And we have a couple options for you in terms of what that might be. Linda, am I right? This is one where they can select multiple options. So it could be more than one thing, of course, but we are interested to know what it is you want to get out of our time today. You're obviously engaged, you're motivated, you're taking time out of your Thursday evening to join us, and I'm very grateful for that. fairly similar to what we saw in Martinsville. So it looks like a number of you are interested in voicing your opposition to the off-cycle redistricting, and I think that's obviously really important. Some people want to learn more. I'm glad to see there's so many. I hope that I'm able to give you new information. And I will say, as Linda mentioned, things change all the time. We updated the information that we had on Tuesday based on last Thursday and things that have happened since then. Of course, we've, not in Indiana necessarily, but we've had elections. California's Proposition 50 on Tuesday, the results on Wednesday. We can talk about that as well. And I really appreciate the two people who said a friend or family member made you come. Thank you for being here anyway. That's my husband. He gets voluntold a lot. So we're going to start with the redistricting basics. And though I'm going to move away from this slide in a moment, I want to let you know that it is essentially the same as this map we have up here. They are different colors, if that's something you notice. But these are our 9 congressional districts in Indiana. So we have a bicameral Congress, meaning there are 2 institutions. That's what the bi part means, like a bicycle, 2 wheels. And in the House of Representatives, there are 435 voting members. They're allocated on the basis of population, and Indiana thus gets 9 of those seats. Of the 9 that you see here, the 2 that are going to be in question are the 2 Democratic seats that we have. So that's the 1st congressional seat. That's Frank Mervan's district, right up there in the region. And then the 7th congressional district. That's very close to where we are, but I believe we are still in the 6th. I live 5 minutes away from here, and I am in the 6th, Jefferson-Shreve district. The 7th is held by Andre Carson. Both the 1st and the 7th are the 2 Democratic districts. I encourage you later, if you haven't looked at the districts before, we've got the map here printed. Come up afterwards and take a look. These are our current districts. And these were drawn in 2021 after the US Census, which is typically when we redistrict. That's part of why this is off-cycle redistricting. This is not normal in terms of the traditional cycle. We redistrict once every 10 years after the US Census. And we're constitutionally mandated to do that because we recognize the population changes. It shifts, it grows, it moves. Do you want to go ahead to the next slide? Perfect. I realize as an educator, I feel a little shameful in saying, I know the maps I have on the right side are small, but I think you can just see in general how our congressional districts have changed over time with every given decade because, again, the population changes. So when we start off with this concept of what is districting, it is very simply drawing the boundaries. The conversation we're having right now in our state are for congressional districts. So our state legislature is tasked with drawing three boundaries, basically. Our 9 congressional seats, and then for the Indiana General Assembly, the 100 House seats and the 50 Senate seats. So they're responsible for drawing those maps. And when we're talking about districting, as I said, we usually do this once every 10 years because that's when we have the results of the US Census. Now, you didn't miss anything. We haven't had a new US Census. President Trump has asked states to redraw the district lines because of his concerns for the next congressional primary. And I should add this is important to me. I'm nonpartisan, I'm an educator. I want people to learn and have information. He's been very clear about this. So he's been very transparent in that motive. That's something that's important to him. And there are good reasons to be concerned for the Republicans in the congressional midterms. Typically, the party in power and the party of the president fares very poorly. And that's true regardless if you're a Democrat or Republican. But voters are oftentimes very impatient. And you have 2 years in the House. They all serve 2-year terms, 6 in the Senate, of course. But every 2 years, people say, wait a second, they didn't get done everything I wanted. Wait a second, I don't like how, and we'll talk about the policies you're interested in later, maybe like how healthcare costs are climbing. I'm not a fan of the economy. I don't like what's going on in terms of immigration, social issues, whatever they may be. And so a lot of times voters, they swing that pendulum back and forth. So typically congressional midterms we see as a referendum on the president and the president's party. That is why some of the states, and we'll talk about some of those other states in a little bit, are considering and have already approved in some cases redistricting. Now, I want to add here gerrymandering because we don't use this phrase a lot right now. In part, we don't have new maps. But gerrymandering and apportionment are important to understand with districting too. Apportionment is just making sure that every district has the same number of people. And that is very important. When we're talking about redrawing district lines to the map that I have over here, when you're moving a boundary, I think of it like, not an architect here, but moving like a wall in the house. If you're making one room bigger, you're gonna make the other room smaller. You've got to move those lines. So when we're talking about impacting two districts, you're certainly, if you're trying to flip the two districts, as the Republicans may try to do so, you're still going to impact other districts. And to the point of gerrymandering, this is when you draw the district lines for partisan advantage, right, for some kind of political gain. Now, doing this on the basis of race is illegal. We used to rely on what we called the intent test. That's what the courts would use. So they would say, well, if you redrew the lines in a way that is undermining minority voters, right? The intent test was, did you mean to do that? Oh, you didn't? Okay, it's not a problem. You can understand how that's really problematic to try to prove intent. So we no longer rely on that. The new judicial standard is effects test. Oh, you didn't mean to? You accidentally did that? Doesn't matter. You still did that. So to be very clear, gerrymandering on the basis of race is illegal. But gerrymandering on the basis of partisanship is not necessarily illegal. And right now we have the Roberts Supreme Court at the federal level. It's a 9-person court, but it's 6-3, conservative. And in the Rucho versus Common Cause case, I realize this is 6 years old, but it's often the one we point to as the current landmark case for redistricting. John Roberts said that drawing the lines and the court's evaluation of these is unjudiciable, which in addition to being a fun word to say, means that it is not the responsibility of the courts to be involved. Right? From our Chief Justice of the Supreme Court's perspective, the drawing of the district maps lies within the legislature, not within the judicial branch. So while there will certainly be conversations and lawsuits, I just think it's important to understand at the highest court in the land, we know they are not necessarily at this moment interested in taking up or challenging some of these redistricting cases. Yeah. So I mentioned this earlier, but I think it's really important for us to know who draws these maps, right? And I personally love state differences. I love state gov. I teach state government. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. So you can see in this map here, Indiana is in that bright, let's go ahead and call it Hoosier red. We have our state legislatures. They're responsible for drawing both congressional maps as well as their own Indiana General Assembly maps. So that's both the House and the Senate for the General Assembly. And many states do rely on their state legislature to draw these boundaries. I would highlight, though, not all states do. California, as I mentioned, just passed Proposition 50 by fairly overwhelming margins, by the way. I think it was a 30% difference in terms of margin. And from a political science perspective, we say 20% is landslide. So, geographically, I don't know what's bigger than a landslide, tsunami, right? But it was fairly overwhelming. So that allows, by the way, Governor Gavin Newsom in California, their state legislature will redraw maps. They're looking to flip 5 Republican seats to Democrat. And the way the proposition was written, the language, fascinating stuff, is very clear that it only applies for 2026, that's our upcoming congressional midterm, 2028, and 2030. So they will still count as this teal color here, right? They'll still have their independent commission in 2030. The proposition was very clearly limited just to these 3 congressional cycles for that redrawing of the boundary. I would add too, we'll talk about Texas. They already did redraw their districts, right? That was their state legislature. And you can see some of the other states that utilize different mechanisms. I will emphasize most of them are state legislature drawn. And then one other thing, just indulge me as an educator. I always like when I'm presented with data, I'm like, I want to look at that more. We will share the slides with you afterwards, but I've also included QR codes and just where you can find this data if you want to look it up later or on your own. Okay. So why does this matter? Congress. and not all of Congress, but specifically the House of Representatives. We've been talking about the Constitution in my class, and I always think it's interesting how inherently conservative, and not in an ideological way, right, but an approach that the founders were, because at the time the Constitution was ratified, right, they only allowed voters at the federal level to select their House of Representatives. We had the 17th Amendment, so now we get to vote for our senators too. But we have the Electoral College that decides the president. The judicial branch, the Supreme Court, is an appointment process where the president nominates, the Senate confirms. So very insulated from popular opinion, and that was intentional. But we still get to elect the House of Representatives, and that's the institution of interest here. Now, I will tell you, this data is from June, so it's actually, you have one more vacancy. There are 3 vacant seats right now. 213 of the members of Congress belong to the Democratic Party. 219 belong to the Republican Party. So that difference, and I know you can do basic subtraction too, is 6 members. We are in day 37 of the government shutdown. It's the longest, arguably, and we'll see when the dust settles, but probably the most damaging government shutdown we've had. We're talking about a very tight margin. The Republicans do enjoy unified government at the federal level. They control the White House, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. But it's in particular these seats, right? And for Indiana, of our 9, you might recall 2 of them are Democrat. So if the maps were redrawn in an off-cycle year, right, those could potentially be 2 Democratic seats that we would change that little blue circle into a red one. Where does it not matter? The U.S. Senate. And I think this is just a helpful refresher too. You probably subconsciously know this, but the Senate boundaries are the state. We're not redrawing state boundaries, although the Illinois-Indiana Boundary Adjustment Committee met 2 weeks ago. I'm still going to call that bluff, but it does not impact the Senate races at all. And for us in Indiana, for what it's worth, we don't have a Senate election. The senators are elected in 3 cycles, Class A, Class B, Class C. We had one in the presidential in 2024. We had one in the congressional midterm in 2022. We'll have one again in the presidential in 2028, but we do not have a Senate race for us in Indiana in this congressional midterm. I do want to talk a little bit about what our districts look like right now. And again, I have this map up here. I showed you what they looked like earlier. This is information from Princeton University's The Gerrymandering Project. And again, as someone who loves state government, I love comparing the states. But they evaluate districts in terms of a couple of key factors. One of them is going to be competitiveness, and I will tell you right up front, that's where Indiana loses. We do not typically have very competitive congressional races. I mentioned landslide earlier, 20%. I usually feel pretty confident I can tell you which candidate's going to win after the primary because the districts are drawn in such a way that they heavily bias one political party, right? But why do we get an A? Sure, competitiveness is not it. In terms of counties, we average about 8 counties in every congressional district. We have 92, of course, in the state. That's actually really good because it tells you they're connecting communities. And though this isn't something oftentimes in politics we think is really important, having homogenous communities, having similar communities is really beneficial in a district and for the representative. And I think of it this way, right? If you are connecting downtown Indianapolis through all the farmland in the southern part of Indiana and then up to Evansville, you're connecting communities that have very different priorities. They have different economies. They probably have different political interests. That's hard for the communities in the district, quite frankly, to be adequately represented. It's really hard for the representative who's like, well, everybody in here is different and they want different things. So having community compactness and those counties is beneficial. And I point out here, while there certainly are good things to challenge, things that we could do better in terms of our congressional districts for Indiana, I'm always proud to see when we're doing well. And quite frankly, you can see here on the map as well, not every state is doing as well. Texas, I've mentioned, has already redistricted. I don't think it's going to change them from a DF rating. I think they're going to fail on this again. California is the better than average with some bias. They will likely go down from there. Awesome, thank you. Okay. So what's the timeline? I recognize this is a lot of data on one slide. And again, as an educator, I'm violating some of my own norms of having font very small, but I felt like this would be helpful for you to see. I included some dates that have already happened, just so you can see the pace at which this has occurred, but also understand how it's very controversial, quite frankly. It's very polarizing. We do have a majority of people in here that said they oppose off-cycle redistricting. Certainly, I think you see some of that contention that's reflected here. So on October 27th, the governor called a special session. Governors in Indiana have limited power in certain ways, but they are the only people who can call a special session. This is when we're outside of our traditional session timeline. So in Indiana, we have a part-time state legislature. And they, on the National Conference of State Legislatures Index, I know it's a little geeky, but I love professionalization, right? We're a 3 out of a 5. So most professionalized state legislatures would be New York or California. It's based on salary, it's based on staff, it's based on the time they're in session. So those are practically like Congress. It's a full-time gig, right? We're a 3. So we meet usually January through March. I always hear in a short session, people say, oh, they're going to try to get out by Valentine's, which would be February 14th. In the time that I've lived in Indiana, I don't think that's happened, but I'm aspirational too. So sure, I always like to think I'll get done more in a day than I do, but that's never happened to me once yet. In a budgeting session, our state legislature meets usually from January through April. So you're talking about 3 to 4 months out of the year, right? They're a part-time state legislature. And I think that's important to see when we talk about this process, because they couldn't redistrict during a normal session. It would be too late in terms of the election cycle. One other thing I'd like to add before I go into that a little bit more, it's an election year coming up, so we do have a short session. And that was intentional by the founders, the authors of the Indiana Constitution of 1851, because when we have a budgeting session, we budget every other year, you wanted to insulate some of, invariably, the negative decisions from popular opinion and recourse. So if you are voting on people right after they've had to make cuts and unpopular decisions, it's going to be a little bit different than if you do elections in the off cycle for budgeting. Now, you can see here, just less than a week later, both the leadership from the House and Senate announced that, in fact, they won't be meeting within the preconceived timeline. When the governor calls a special session, it has to happen within 40 days. Right? The leadership in both the House and the Senate, so that's Speaker of the House, Todd Houston, and Senate President Pro Tem Rod Bray said, we will be meeting December 1st through basically those first 2 weeks of December. And that aligns with what they're allowed to do. I would also add, we don't have a lot of special sessions, but the most recent one was back in the summer of 2022. The governor at that time had already called, this was Eric Holcomb, he'd already called a special session. We had a little bit of surplus money, very fun. We're figuring out how we're gonna get rid of that. But there's also the Dobbs versus Jackson decision that overturned Roe versus Wade and said it was a state level decision to determine abortion policy. So our state legislature came back again a couple weeks after the special session was called, in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks, revised Indiana's abortion policy. So that's the closest comparison when we say, how long will this last? What will it look like? We don't have a lot of great history to rely on. Now, our state legislators, I should say, will return on Tuesday, November 18th. That's been on the books. That's Organization Day. It's unofficially, officially the start of the state legislative session. That's when they convene in Indianapolis. That's when we get a sense of what are the big issues going to be. And typically, I will tell you, in a short session, in recent cycles, it's been social issues, right? I would argue, when we're talking about off-cycle redistricting, this is not your typical cycle. Last things I want to include here, when we're talking about the compressed timeline, and I'm just one of those people who lives with a lot of anxiety, and I think, okay, when does this have to be done? No, really, when does it have to be done? We're coming up again to an election cycle, and you think, oh, well, the 2026 election isn't for another year. Well, yeah, the general isn't. I don't mean to wag my finger at you. The general isn't, but the primary election will be in May. Before that, you have to have candidates. In order to be a candidate, you formally have to file. And I have no doubt there are a lot of candidates that already think they're going to run, but haven't filed yet because you can't until January. We allow a 1-month window. That is slim. right? That's very tight. But it's also important in terms of the off-cycle redistricting, because if you're a candidate, you need to know where you're going to run. And that's going to be challenging. That's going to be problematic. I would also do a big shout out to clerk of courts and everyone who works in elections, because they don't necessarily know which districts they will be in for these things. And you're looking, again, that's the January 7th is when candidate filing begins to the February 6th, candidate filing ends, right? Candidates need to know where they're filing and in what district. So you're really looking at basically a 2-month time period until whatever decisions are made will have to be made. And I mentioned here too, just so you know, get excited, the primary election is on May 5th this year, and then our general, we can officially say it's less than a year away, but I've been counting for a long time, is in November 3rd, 2026. Perfect. I wanted to add this in. I didn't have this for Martinsville, in part because Proposition 50 hadn't been voted on yet. That was from California that we discussed. But though, as a Hoosier, I think you should be very interested and aware of your district. I think our legislators should care mostly about their constituents. We can't pretend that this isn't a larger national issue, and I think it's valuable to see, where does Indiana fit in this conversation? We're not the only state that has been called upon to redistrict. Although I will say we had 2 visits from the vice president. We had our leaders visit the president. We had a phone call too. Right? There's been a lot of pressure on the state. But you can see some of the states that have either already passed or are looking to go through the process. I will say Kansas came out with a statement, the leadership of the Kansas state legislature. I read it on Wednesday, saying they are not interested and they shall not be pursuing redistricting. So that is an update to this map, which was November 4th. But just if you're looking across the state, we also just recently heard from Governor J.D. Pritzker in Illinois, and it feels very much like what we saw in Texas and California. Oh, if Indiana redistricts, we can do that too. So on the map there, you can see it's in the light color, thinly veiled threat, but maybe a response. So if Indiana flips the 2 Democratic, 2 of 9, right? The 2 Democratic congressional seats that we have, redrawing them to make them more Republican, we could expect, at least at this point, based on the governor's comments, that Illinois might do the same, inversely flipping Republican to Democratic seats. Okay. So we mentioned earlier you have note cards available at your table and a writing utensil. I want to be helpful as much as I can, and I want to know if you have questions about the off-cycle redistricting, about the process in general, about what this looks like, what we know right now. It can be certainly state-related or national, and we have some volunteers. Once you have your note card, if you just want to hold it up, they'll collect those.
There are some seats up front.
There's a table that is missing note cards. Does anyone have a few? I know you guys are all writing on them, but if there's a few that I could share with this one table, I would appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Oh, good. Sorry about that, guys. Please help yourself. Are there any note cards that I can collect right now?
If you have one, you can just hold it up.
Here.
Terrific.
May I? Thank you. Thank you. Laura, are you ready for a question?
I'm ready, and I hope it's the dog or cat, because I didn't vote, but I'm a dog person.
Thankfully, it has nothing to do with pets.
Okay.
But
ready.
this is a pointed question.
Yeah.
The question is, how is this not cheating?
That's a really good question. There have been a lot of conversations about whether or not this is constitutional, and there's a great piece in the Indy Star I would recommend that you look at. I have to say, first and foremost, I'm a political scientist. I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I have no doubt there will be challenges within the state. I mentioned partisan gerrymandering is allowed in our country, and I think to that point, there's a lot of questions like, should it be, right? Congress could make laws about that if Congress could make laws, right? We're 37 days in the government shutdown, so I'm not that optimistic there. But right now, the way the rules are, it's a very fair question. It's a very fair concern. Unfortunately, there'll be challenges. I don't think that's going to stop the ball from moving forward for those that support the off-cycle redistricting. Right.
Good. Thank you. I have 3 more questions here, and then I'll go around the room and pick up, or Linda will. Thank you. Okay, we'll just go fast and furious,
Perfect.
okay?
I'm ready.
Has Indiana ever done off-cycle redistricting before?
Not to my knowledge, and I'd emphasize to my knowledge, it is possible, but no, I don't believe we have. And in fact, just as a national conversation, no, this has always been, it's accepted, we do it once every 10 years. This is incredibly unusual, emphasize the word unusual.
Good. If this passed, does it go into effect immediately?
So I have no doubt they would include that because that's the intent, right? That's how California's Prop 50 was written, to be very clear that it goes effect for the next 3 congressional districts, and then they return back to their independent commission. So yes, it would, and it would have to go into effect not just immediately, but very quickly, because I mentioned that filing deadline for candidates. They need to know what district they're filing in.
Good. Okay, so sometimes what we hear or read on social media is indeed questionable, but that's where this one comes from. I have seen comments on social media that redistricting would result in 4 Democrats being elected and 5 Republicans. How could this be?
So Republicans have a supermajority in the General Assembly. If they did a really poor job, I suppose, drawing the lines, they could make the districts more competitive. And can I just say as a sidebar, as a political scientist and a lover of democracy, we should want competitive districts. We should want no landslide elections. We should want the outcomes to be close as possible, because then you're voting on the candidates and the policies and the issues. You're not voting on the party. You feel like your vote matters. We have higher voter turnout and higher engagement. I know that's not what the question is asking, but there is, when you're moving those district lines, you're putting some voters into a new district and you're taking some voters out of there. So in theory, sure, we could actually make most of these districts incredibly competitive. That's, to be very clear, not the intent of the off-cycle redistricting. And though I think it would serve us well as voters and a lover of democracy, that's not what's going on in this case. But I appreciate that question.
Mm-hmm. What is the motive if our state already has fair representation?
Yes. So the reason why the president has focused on Indiana, in my opinion, is for a couple key factors. We have a Republican supermajority in the General Assembly. So you feel like that should be a good sign for the Republicans, right? And we have a governor who's recently elected but previously served in the Senate, who's aligned himself with the president as well. So I imagine from the presidential administration, you're looking at this and you're like, yes, this should be easy, right? There's no problem. This is a state where we should be able to get 2. And it is. We only have 2 districts in Congress that are Democrat. I can't emphasize that enough. So you're not talking about California can give you 5. Texas already did. You don't have that opportunity here. To the point of the question, though, I think when we're looking at what we're talking about in terms of these districts, it's invaluable to think about the representation element, though. Right? The districts are created so that you have representation in Congress. And as we talk about this is your voice at the federal level. I don't think in general, and this is my opinion, I've lived in Indiana for 11 years, the Hoosiers like being told what to do from federal government. I think we see ourselves as being very independent and autonomous. There's a bit of a pride, maybe some humility in that too. And I think some of the pushback, some of the conflict, it's going to be coming within the Republican Party, by the way. The Democrats are opposed to this, but they're a super minority. And there are certainly some Republicans that are in favor, but there are some of those that are opposed in the General Assembly. That's where the conflict's going to come, and it's going to. Those are where the hearts and minds have to change if the off-cycle redistricting, in fact, does happen.
These are all really good questions.
They're fantastic.
And we're trying to combine. Some of you had the common questions, just stated differently. This one's unique, though. Why not handle this like California did? Take it to the people and not to the legislature?
I love this question. This is really important. In Indiana, you can't. So our Constitution of 1851 allows no mechanisms for direct democracy. This was a question that came up after Dobbs versus Jackson. I would always have people say, why don't they bring it to the voters? Now, you can also imagine why government wouldn't want to bring it to a vote, right? Like if you know what you want the outcome, I don't ask my students, do you want a final exam? I have one of my students right here. Samuel, you're getting a final exam. I don't ask them a question when I know the answer, okay? But to that point, we don't have direct democracy, so things like referendums, initiatives, and recalls don't exist in our state. For policy to change, it has to go through the state legislature, full stop. And so that's why we don't have propositions like they do in California. There are other states that have direct democracy too, but we do not have that in our state.
Good.
Thank you. I really appreciate that question.
That's a good one. They're all good. Thank you very much for participating. Keep writing, and we'll keep going fast, okay?
Yeah.
Do we know who are the holdouts among Republican lawmakers opposing redistricting?
Some people have been public in their opposition. There have been a lot of people that are not on the record, and I would push you, if your representatives are like that, to ask them, right? To call, to write to them. And I always tell my students this, because I love getting to interact with public officials, and so I ask them this too. I'm like, hey, if someone calls you or writes to you, do you care about that? Do you listen? And they'll say, yes, they do. Now, that one particular phone call may not change hearts and minds. They're not going to say, oh my goodness, Sally from Beech Grove thinks I should do this, so I guess I'm going to do it. But it's never one. There's attrition, right? It's lots of them. It's hearing from lots of your constituents. It's hearing over and over again the same things. And that is invaluable. So I think that's one of the most important things you can take from this is making sure that you're reaching out. I would also add, at this point, it's 2 weeks old, and not to plug the Indy Star, I don't work for the Indy Star, but they had published a piece, because I was curious. I was like, where are my folks on this? That had everybody in the state legislature who was in support, who was opposed, and who had not had a statement yet. I will tell you, I was surprised, this was 2 weeks old, how many people did not have a public opinion on something that they will be voting on in the next month. Thank you.
So this is an interesting question, and I had it last week, and I wanted to ask it. So if, California has now reversed their independent commission,
Yeah.
the red states are piling on, if more blue states pile on, do we just get back to where we started?
It's numerically, it is possible. And wouldn't that be funny in a non-ha-ha way, right? Yes, it ramps up the stakes, right? Because especially to the point of Governor Pritzker's remarks, I was asked this earlier by a journalist today. They say, what does that do for Indiana? And I will say, I hope our state legislatures care more about their constituents in their district than what the governor of another state says. But we can't deny that we're looking at a map that's changing. And we are in control of what we're in control of, which would be our state congressional districts. And when I say we, I mean our state legislators. But it is numerically, yes, it's possible that it would be a wash to end up with. And it would really depend on a number of factors, because you're talking about filing, you're talking about primaries, you're talking about what states ultimately pursue redistricting, and those, as I mentioned with Kansas, that ultimately choose not to.
Do we as voters have any recourse since they are trying to make our votes not count?
Yes, 125 of your 150 General Assembly members will be up for election in November 2026. So half of the Senate. Our state senators serve 4-year terms, so half of the 50, I know you can do division, right? 25 of the state senators will be up for election, and all 100 of the members of the Indiana General Assembly in the House will be up for election. I would add there's recourse on lots of different ways, because the president, in previous election cycles, I don't know if I've heard him say it for this particular one, but has threatened primary challengers. And this is a slightly different conversation, but when we talk about districts that are so far gerrymandered, they're not competitive, most of the competition is in the primary. So that's a really big threat, because if you do have, as an incumbent, a primary challenger, obviously you have to win the primary to make it to the general. You don't get to move on. You don't collect $200. You don't get out of jail free, as the Monopoly game would say. But that's where most of the competition will be. So I think there will certainly be recourse in a variety of ways. As voters, though, that's 125 of the 150 seats that we as Hoosiers can hold people accountable for.
Okay. Republicans want the only 2 seats that are held by Democrats. If these 2 are taken away, how is this not taxation without representation?
It's a great question. The governor was in Evansville earlier this week and was In the formal moderated remarks, not asked about redistricting, which makes sense to me. I was like, oh yeah, they were probably very intentional about that. But he did take questions afterwards, and there was a question about redistricting. And he made a claim I've also heard Representative Andrew Ireland say, which is this would be more representative of the state. If that were to be true, and if you're talking about like all 9 districts going to Republicans, our election outcomes would have to be like 100% for the Republican candidates, 0% for the Democrats. And that's simply not the case. Look at your statewide offices. Look at the US Senate race. Look at the governor's race. Look at any of those statewide executive offices. It's not typically very competitive. You're talking about maybe a 45-55 split at best. But that would indicate that, in fact, the 2 Democratic seats we currently have are probably still underrepresentative in terms of Hoosier voters. I don't think in any state, the ones that are talking about redistricting, I should add, maybe as a caveat, where you have 100% of voters in anything. I have a family of 5, and there's never 100% of anything we agree on, dinner included. Right? That's not how groups work, and that's not how democracy should work either, in my opinion.
Okay, this next one I think is a quick answer.
Okay, sorry.
Here we go. No. But it's good. Do I have to pay state taxes if I have no representation?
We have a state senator in the room, but yes, I think unfortunately you still do. But then I just make sure that you absolutely get out to the ballot box to vote.
A few of these questions we're going to answer later on here in a moment. But we're going to finish this portion with this final one. I don't feel like my vote has ever mattered except when Obama was elected. How do we get discouraged voters to vote to maybe change this feeling? Many peers feel the same way. Some don't vote because of this or don't take any other actions.
Educate. Like, man, it's one of the things that I think is so important. It's one of the things that I'm grateful that you are here tonight. But you know how this really works in a butterfly effect is you tell your neighbors and you tell your coworkers tomorrow and you say, hey, did you know about this? Hey, she mentioned this Indy Star article or this data from this organization, or I'm going to look at that. Recenter Indiana is focused on educating voters, and that's so important because we graduate from high school or college or whatever we do, and we think like, oh, education, you're done with that. Every election cycle requires educated and engaged voters. And I can't emphasize enough how important that is, but I feel, I teach college students, I hear all the time, like they get discouraged after one election cycle. And I'm like, whoa, baby, I've got decades. Right? It's attrition, it's sharing information, voter turnout matters. And when we look at like the elections from Tuesday, my 2 big takeaways in any election cycle, look at turnout, it was high. I know it wasn't in Indiana, but you look at New Jersey, you look at Virginia, you look at New York City and California, high voter turnout. That tells you something. And then look at margins. This isn't about the New Jersey and the Virginia governor's race. Those are wide margins, right? So even, you lose some games, you lose some elections. Attrition matters, showing up matters. Certainly spreading the word, being educated and engaged absolutely matter. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for all your questions. This next one, actually, all of you are gonna help us answer. What is our best guess for what Hoosiers really think about this? So that, Linda will take it from there and you'll help us with your phone polling. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So I told you there was a real voting portion of this evening, and this is the real voting portion on the things that matter. So, how do you think off-cycle redistricting would impact the voices and voters, the voices and votes of people like you? Would it magnify our vote? Would it minimize our vote? Encourage us to vote? Discourage us to vote? No impact or unsure? And this is one of those questions that you can pick more than one thing. People have got the hang of voting, I see. Very good. Okay, let's see how we're doing. Minimize our voice and vote, which is kind of consistent with the question that we asked at the beginning in terms of why you were here. So any other people who want to click, you can still vote, even though I've turn the page. But this looks pretty clear. Okay. The next question is one we really care about tonight. It's the big one. So based on the discussion that we've had and what you've learned from our chat with Laura, do you support off-cycle redistricting? And this is a yes, no, or a pick one. We should have made this a word cloud. Okay, I don't know how this is going to go. Let's see. Oh, we have a yes, but just one, it looks like. Okay, it's a pretty decisive crowd, and what I'm really excited is there are at least 36 people who are out there voting, so thank you for all of you who are participating. Another interesting question. So, if my elected officials vote for off-cycle redistricting, they have earned my vote, they have lost my vote, or not sure. So is there a consequence? Wow. Another pretty clear result there. Anybody surprised by that? Okay, we said we were going to give you an opportunity to weigh in on some other issues tonight, because we know redistricting is not the thing that matters in your daily life so much. It's a very topical point right now, but it's not clearly the only thing that you're facing. So we're going to do another word cloud, and we're going to let you enter the issues that you care about. Again, it works just like the ice cream question. You can start entering a few words, and then you can start seeing how other people have entered issues, and you can also vote for issues that they have voted on. You can only enter the same issue one time or vote for it one time. So you can't, put your thumb on the scale. And we'll be able to see how these start shaping up. Healthcare was a big one last week. Housing, hunger, SNAP, special education, affordability, lots of things related to affordability, said in different ways. Homelessness popping up. It's kind of fascinating to watch it change. Okay, it looks like you can continue voting, but we're going to open up the room now for people to actually give voice to the concerns that are on the board up here. And let's start with healthcare, because it seems to be the one that has been getting lots of votes, and it's pretty consistent with what we heard last week as well. So would somebody like to stand up and voice their issue or concern about healthcare?
Any thoughts that you'd like to share about this issue in particular?
Don't be shy.
Do you want to write in on a note card? Or is there another issue? Really, this is our opportunity, as you wish. to share with us, with your neighbors.
And we
really
did have a
putting
couple
voice
of
to this.
legislators just join us a little bit after we started. Maybe you'd like to give a wave and just say your name?
Wait for the mic. Oh, okay. Thanks, Jocelyn. I'm Mitch Gore. I'm the state rep for Beech Grove, if you live north of Churchman, the southeast side of Indianapolis, Cumberland. So it's my privilege to be here. Thanks for showing up.
Good to be with you all tonight. I'm Andrea Hunley, and I'm one of your state senators. It's great to be with you.
Great, thank you. Okay, no takers to speak about health care. Oh, we have one? Okay, thank you. Somebody has to break the ice.
Thank you. You know, with healthcare prices going up, I understand that healthcare, even for senior citizens, are going up. That's one big issue. People are not seeing that in the state, actually in the national level. And the State House has a lot of bearing on healthcare. SNAP, there's so many things going on right now, and we need to come together and vote this next time. Just vote.
Who else? Oh, okay.
Would you mind stepping over here? Is that okay?
It just takes one person to get you all started.
Yes, I'm a retired nurse, and I can see what I feel is so important. We cannot have health care that's affordable, that we can have patients go to the hospital, get treated, and afford and not have to make a decision of taking care of themselves and taking their medications versus paying bills. That just creates a sicker, weaker community. And then in the long run, we all bear the burden because in our state and nationally, I think from President Reagan, you can go to the emergency room and treat it. No one can be turned away from the emergency room. So it just seems like a win-win if we could make insurance for all and make everything more affordable, because in the long run, when people do not get treated, things linger, illnesses get worse, they become more debilitated, and all that just does nothing but add to the overall burden, especially financially. And the taxpayers wind up paying for that. It doesn't go away. The taxpayers wind up paying for it, and we do increases who can afford insurance. It increases those rates. So I want to add that. Thank you.
I never, ever talk in front of people, so this is very important for all of us. Our healthcare system just isn't working. We're spending more on it than any other country in the world per person, and we don't get good outcomes for it. And so we really need to do something major to look at it and make sure that people can get health care, make sure it's affordable, and that some portion of our population is not getting rich off of health care.
Thank you for sharing your voice with us. Thank you.
Okay, we're on a roll now. This side of the room, I'd like to hear somebody have a... Oh, here we go.
No.
Oh. Any takers over here?
Bring the
Doesn't
mic
have to
over
be
here.
healthcare. How about public education? That's pretty high on the list. There have been a lot of changes in public education over the last couple of years. How do you guys feel about that? Oh, behind you.
It was announced today that our Attorney General, Rokita, is suing IPS for supposedly not cooperating with ICE. I find this abominable. These are children. And the schools, in my opinion, should be off limits. Plus, Rokita is using our taxpayer dollars to sue IPS. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for saying that. And I was a principal in IPS for 11 years before running for office. And so I just want to remind us too that children are constitutionally protected to have access to education regardless of their status. And so what he's doing is an incredible farce and is a huge waste of taxpayer dollars. And so I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate folks calling in to remind him of that. But you're right, all of these children have a right to an education, and it's just unconscionable that we would think that any educator would do otherwise than educate children. So thank you.
So do we have educators in the room here? Healthcare professionals? I know one educator, a couple healthcare, Reed. Okay. Democracy is up there pretty high on our list. We've kind of been talking about that earlier today. Are there somebody want to give voice to what that means to them and their peers?
Hi, I'm Mary Baker, and I feel like I'm on stage. I am just very concerned. Our congressmen have not been to work for a month. There are issues upon issues upon issues, and it's not about health care. How come they're not talking about economy, SNAP, these things? Go to work and talk about those. But it just is driving me crazy that we have no say in him tearing down our White House. We have no say in any of it because our congressmen aren't even at work.
Thank you.
I'm an independent. I voted Republican half my life, and I stopped voting Republican once we got into a 20-year war that cost trillions of dollars in lives from a lie from the Republican president. I'm sure from the answers up there, everybody sees that our president's trying to dismantle the country. I mean, I don't know why our senators are not doing their jobs and why the House of Representatives is not in order, but I mean, he's trying to extort media, universities, and law firms. He's trying to control the arts and the museums. And for the first time in my life at age 69, I was out protesting. It took me 69 years, but I'm mad enough now that I'll be out there every time we have a protest. And I expect everybody else to be there too. Now he wants to extort the public for $230 million for his pain and suffering from when he was prosecuted for his crimes.
Thank you.
A lot of energy around this one, a lot of feelings.
Thank you.
You know, there are a lot of things that happen at the state level too, and I know it's easy to get really the national headlines grab most of the news. But there are issues that, you know, our legislature deals with every year that actually affect us very directly, whether that's education or healthcare or housing or education policy. So any of those types of issues that you would like to speak to where we have some listeners here? Okay.
Yeah, specifically at the local level, I'm the clerk treasurer of Beech Grove, so this is all very upfront for me. But speaking of local decisions and public education and proper representation, I'm really concerned about how the bill that was passed last year that is property taxes, how that is going to affect not only excluded cities like Beech Grove, because they're at the risk of no longer existing in about 4 years, but also our public school system is at risk of not existing in 2 years. So I think it's a slippery slope that's happening right now. Even with the gerrymandering, I understand California's decision, and in some ways I do respect it, and I do think it might be a good thing in the long run. However, if we're going to say, he jumped over a cliff, I'm gonna do it too, it's a continuous slippery slope. How do we get out of the pit? Like, I think that's also like, one of my biggest concerns is I don't see how we turn it around, how we get out of the pit, and especially with Facebook and TikTok and algorithms. I could keep talking, but I work mainly with Republicans. I'm a Democrat. But I think what Dr. Wilson said about educating your neighbor, that is the most important thing you can do, because I've learned every single day that algorithms are important and people only see what the algorithm wants you to see. And once you sit down and have a conversation, people realize they're actually much closer on things than they realize. And I think we need to take a step forward and be good neighbors to each other and try to solve these problems and not just rely on our legislator because they are our voice, but if we're not bound together, they won't know what we really want.
I think that's an excellent point. Thank you. Okay, any last minute things that people really want to say? Issues they want to give voice to? Okay. Well, you've been a great audience tonight, and we really appreciate your participation. And we will begin our wrap-up. And I'd like to introduce Jocelyn Bear, who is our executive director here at Recenter. And she joined us in June, has been doing a great job. We could have never put together these listening sessions without her. And so we're really thankful to have her as part of the team. And she just wants to close us out and invite us all to enjoy some cookies and conversation with neighbors.
One more question on the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hold on, we've got one more question for your phone.
Oh, we actually might have a couple. I'm sorry, I really lost track. So thank you for holding me accountable. Okay, in general, my elected officials care about my concerns. Strongly agree, agree, don't know, disagree, strongly disagree.
The current ones, right?
The current ones. And we're really talking about state level, right? Okay, let's see. Can it? You know, it's not completely one-sided. So, I think this one also reflects who you are represented by. And so there are at least 10-ish people who feel heard, but there are clearly a lot more who don't. Okay, the last word cloud. How are you feeling about the state of politics in Indiana? And let's see. Again, you can vote for things that other people have entered. Doom. Oh. I don't see any real optimism there. Do you see any optimism? Yeah. Yes.
I would just like to ask the representatives that are here and present tonight, what did you glean from this meeting? What is your takeaway from this small group? I mean, there's maybe 40 people here, 50 people here. What are you thinking about as you enter into the next 2 months before you make a decision that first week of December? And you listen to all these people. I have no idea whether people are here are Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and that really doesn't matter. But you're here for a reason. You obviously are concerned about what the people in your districts feel. So what are you, I'm not asking for your decision, just what are you gleaning from all this?
I'll give you my decision. if you follow me on social media or anywhere else, you could see that I'm vehemently opposed to a mid-cycle gerrymander. Frankly, this reaffirmed that all the door knocking, all the conversations with neighbors, I felt like I was pretty close to people. I've lived here all my life, and I'm like, usually I feel like if I feel a certain way about something, I bet the majority do too. But this just reaffirms it. I mean, I was a no, but I do believe it's important to listen, and maybe I gleaned something that I hadn't thought of. I did not. Frankly, I remain a very solid no on gerrymandering. And I also have just very, I know nobody was like talking about me or but like, it's just very, very sad, the response to like my state elected officials care about me, right? They care about me and my family. Because we do have a lot of issues that, I'll try to not pontificate too much, but a special session that the Constitution says can only be called if the public welfare requires it. And there's much that the public welfare requires, and redrawing districts is not at all one of those.
Thank you, Representative Gore. And it really is an honor to serve with Representative Gore. I think one of the things I took away from this evening, and I'm a no, by the way, on redistricting. I was when I walked into the room, and I'm in the Senate, and the Senate are the holdouts right now. And I've been really proud of my colleagues. And in the Senate, there are 10 of us who are Democrats. I'm one of the Democrats. But we work really hard together, all of us do. We have to get anything done. And I'm a 6th-generation Hoosier, so I've lived in Indiana my entire life. And I feel when I walked into this room, it really felt like just like sitting around one of the tables in one of my church basements back home, right? It just felt very comfortable, like where you walk into a room, you don't know what party people are from, but we all are working together for the same cause, right? We care about the same things. We care about our families and our healthcare and our schools. And so it just felt very familiar, but also because many of your faces I have seen often at the State House and at these protests as well. And so one of my big takeaways is keep showing up. It matters. It matters when you are at the State House. It matters when you are there having your voice heard. It matters when you're there testifying. It matters when you are there making phone calls. It matters when you're there just sitting on a bench waiting for us to come out so that you can talk to us in the hallway. All of those conversations matter. And so that's one of my key takeaways tonight is that I've already built so many relationships with so many of you in the room, and that's just by happenstance. And all of those things matter because when you build those relationships with elected officials, whether we're right in your district or not, it helps us to understand where you're coming from. And I think that that's one of the reasons why those folks in the Senate have been holdouts, because of all of the folks who keep showing up, the folks who keep calling, the folks who keep writing letters, who say, this is not what Hoosiers want. Remember me, I'm your neighbor. I'm telling you, this is not what we want. And they're holding out. And so keep it up. It's working.
Thank you very much. That was perfect. And I think there's actually one more question. This one should, I hope. After this evening's session, do I feel better informed about off-cycle redistricting? Okay. So we've done our job here. We really do appreciate all of the input and the closing remarks from our elected officials and the way that you've engaged with us this evening. So thank you very much for your participation. And I once again will turn it over to Jocelyn for real.
To wrap it up, thank you all for being here, but I also want to share some big thank yous to Dr. Laura Merrifield Wilson for sharing with us her wisdom and information. Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson. Recenter Indiana invited several state lawmakers to join us here in Beech Grove tonight. And I know it's a busy time, but I especially want to recognize the two state lawmakers that joined us tonight to listen. So Representative Gore, Senator Hunley, thank you very much for joining us today. Recenter Indiana is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization, and several of our board members are here helping out, and it's because of them that we were able to welcome you today and present you information and share with you and listen to your voices. So I want to recognize you met Linda Heisman. She is our board treasurer. Adrian Slash is our board vice president. Thank you, Adrian. Brian Weir Harden is here. I don't know where he's probably working out there. Phil Bremen is here, Steve Mannheimer, and Wendy Brewer. So I just want to recognize our amazing board of Recenter Indiana. Thank you. But most of all, thank you for being here and taking your time, sharing your voice with us, sharing your work on your phone to contribute your voice. We were here to listen, but we were all here to listen as a community, so we are so grateful for your time tonight. Government works better when we use our voices and our votes. We are holding one more listening session that'll be in Fishers next Thursday. We've done 3 in total, and we look forward to wrapping up in Fishers in Hamilton County. We will be sharing this feedback, not only your words, but some of the graphs that you saw here, with state lawmakers so that they know what you had to say. A video recording of this entire program not only was live streaming today, but if you want to relive it, you can view it as a recording on indianacitizen.org. And we especially want to thank the support of Indiana Citizen for participating with us and making this available to even more people who could not join us tonight. We encourage you. Thank you. We encourage you to reach out to your elected officials. Your voice does matter. So capture those phone numbers and make some phone calls. They do have impact. If you would, please join us now. We have some cookies here for you to say thank you and enjoy the company with each other. Thank you for coming together as a community. We appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.